John Solomon, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Sean.
All right, so, now we know, because of your reporting, some of the key revelations, that there was a previously undisclosed January 2017 memo underway and what we find is the British National Security Advisor sent Trump advisor Michael Flynn a memo in January of 2017. We now know that Congress has identified multiple witnesses who have saw or handled that memo, including a whistleblower. And Robert Mueller's team questioned witnesses about the warning, and Flynn doesn't recall seeing the memo, but from what I hear, that memo exists.
Well, that is the grand question right now. There is a scramble in Washington to try to locate this memo. It occurred during the transition period, so it's believed it was delivered on January 12th, 2017, a very important date, 8 days before the inauguration, the day that the second FISA was approved, and long before the third and fourth FISAs were approved. And if the United States government received the warning, as recalled by Flynn's staffers, that the British had interviewed Steele or had contact with Steele, reviewed his dossier, and did not deem it to be reliable or credible, that would be a significant revelation. And let me remind you about something else. When we're in that period where we have basically two presidents, the sitting president, Barack Obama, on his way out the door, and the president-elect, Donald Trump, about to come in the door, it is not uncommon for a foreign government to communicate the same message to both people. So there's a strong possibility, just under the protocol and predicate of how transitions work, that the same information that the National Security Advisor in Great Britain sent to Mike Flynn may have also been sent to someone like Susan Rice or someone in the White House for the Obamas, which would mean two separate administrations, all of official Washington, did receive some form of warning about Steele's credibility. Now, the document has not been located. All we know now is that some witnesses remember it and have described it to both Mueller's investigation and now multiple congressional committees, and now the search is on to find this document in the archives.
But there's so much more when you really dig down to the bottom of where we got in all of this. Do you agree with me that it was so unbelievable to me that Robert Mueller actually cited something that he said many times was not a factor in his decision-making, which is the Office of Legal Counsel or Justice Department policy, or the consideration of whether you can or cannot indict a sitting president. And as a result of his 9.5-minute pre-planned and what seemingly was read statement, it became a debacle because he had said just the opposite. And yet he was able to feed this, conspiracy mob media mentality and the Democrats' mentality. Oh, now we got the impeachment thing we wanted. And yet there were how many witnesses that heard him say, no, that was not a consideration. We just didn't make a decision. We let the Attorney General make the decision as the special counsel statute calls for.
That's right. I think, listen, the fact that there had to be a correction within 6 or 7 hours of this extraordinarily late and unusual statement by Robert Mueller tells you that there was another force at work. And, some people who've looked at that press conference who are linguistic experts have told me it didn't look like Bob Mueller was reading his own words. He seemed to be unfamiliar. He stumbled or tripped over some of the words. It's almost like he was reading somebody else's script. And that's how you might end up with Bob Mueller saying something in a 9-minute press conference that's contrary and antithetical to the evidence of his own private conversations. Whoever wrote that, whether it was Bob Mueller or one of his deputies like Andrew Weissman or someone like that, the statement had to be corrected. That is a warning sign that the messaging was intended to be misleading. You couldn't get something that simple, that wrong. And it set a new question for us. Are there other things in the Mueller report that could be just as wrong or inaccurate? Are there assumptions that are not based in fact? And I'm beginning to hear from defense attorneys, I'm beginning to hear from intelligence professionals that there are things in the Mueller report that don't jibe with the public evidence that they are aware of or the private evidence that they have access to. I think that is going to become a dynamic in the next couple of months. If Bob Mueller got major things wrong in this report, you have to ask, what did we just spend 2 years doing? And why would it be written? Why would it be written to evade or go around or stumble over facts that are contrary to it? And why were so many things, like you pointed out, Sean, why don't we look at the problems with the Steele dossier and the Mueller report? It's like the Steele dossier didn't even exist in the Mueller report. It's mentioned like 1 or 2 times. Why was the investigation crafted to go around anything except the things that might damage or harm the president? That's going to become a question that I think will consume Washington in the next 2 to 3 months.
So we all know, those of us that really listen to what the Attorney General says, those that know the history of the Independent Counsel Act becoming the Special Counsel Act, the rules, procedures, decision-making. The Attorney General has been clear that Mueller had all the resources, time, effort, and, to do what he wanted to do.
That's right.
If he went before Congress, how difficult a time do you think he would have? Because I don't think he wants to face Jordan, Meadows, and Nunes and others, Doug Collins, because they're going to tear this apart. And he's not going to have good answers because there are no good answers for him.
Yeah, and, I think Rudy Giuliani said something on your show last night that really stuck in my head because it's consistent with what I've heard from witnesses and defense lawyers who dealt extensively with the special counsel's office. Bob Mueller was not omnipresent in this investigation. He almost always seemed to be missing. In fact, Rudy called him the Wizard of Oz. I've used that in one of my columns previously because I've heard that. There's a real question, is Bob Mueller really even that versant in the actual details of the investigation? He obviously got something wrong in his statement. And if you listen to Bill Barr's interview yesterday, I thought there was a significant statement by Barr that hasn't gotten a lot of attention. Bill Barr said his team of lawyers, the legal experts, believe Mueller's team got the legal analysis of the law wrong.
Well, we just played that. He said the legal analysis of the Mueller report did not reflect the views of the DOJ.
Yeah, and it may have only reflected the views of a lawyer. Again, you keep thinking he's singling out somebody or a small group of people. If you get the legal analysis wrong, if you get the statement wrong, and now let's look and see if he even has the facts right in the report, we are all going to look back and question, did we really get our money's worth, or what was this 2-year investigation really about? I think that's going to be a really fundamental question. Normally when special prosecutors' reports are done, they're done and we move on. Bob Mueller opened up a door for us to re-examine his behavior based on this news conference on Wednesday. I think the facts in his report need to be examined more closely, given what we're now seeing in his behavior and what the Attorney General said about his legal analysis. Could there be other flaws, other intentional or unintentional misinformation in that report? I think that's where Washington is going to focus in the next month. Keep an eye on that dynamic.
Not exonerated, John Solomon, is not a standard of justice that is acceptable in this country. It's all the rush to judgment, presumption. There's no presumption of innocence. It's guilt by accusation. But it's just the opposite here because as we've been, and you've been such a big part of it, as the onion is being unpeeled, we find out abuse of power, corruption, starting with the rigged investigation into Hillary's crimes. And, of course, a real crime, underlying Espionage Act, real intent, destroy the evidence, what she did with subpoenaed emails, et cetera. Then you got the whole issue of the bought and paid for dossier you mentioned earlier. Well, they were all warned about that. They were warned by Bruce Orr. They were warned. You broke the story about Kathleen Kavlak from the State Department who warned.
Now we may have the British.
Now we have the British. Now, what if the president, when is he leaving for Great Britain? I think today or tomorrow?
He's on his way, yes.
And what if the president of the United States asks, well, what did you know about Christopher Steele, and what did you know about his work on the dossier? And did anybody in our government outsource what would be illegal in this country, intelligence gathering, on
the Five Eyes?
The Five Eyes, which is all these countries. Well, we can't do it in our country, but we'll do it for you and share it with you.
That's right. I think those are the questions that the president will ask. I think if the Brits can confirm that they sent this memo to the president, it will be yet another important piece of information that showed how much that the Obama administration knew was wrong with Steele's document, and yet they used it to continue to pursue the president in the absence of any evidence of collusion, maybe in the end to set up a perjury or an obstruction trap for the president. You really have to wonder, why did we keep extending an investigation for which there was no basis of evidence? And I think one of the things, Sean, you said earlier on that really is rung in my head in the last couple of days as you look back at the conduct of the Mueller report, you have to wonder why, after not finding evidence to substantiate a crime or to justify a prosecution, why they took so much time to write a narrative. Because if you remember my column the day the Mueller report came out.
I'll tell you what, why don't you pick it up on the other side? I got to get this break in here. John Solomon, investigator. All right, as we continue with John Solomon. John, all right, I ask this usually and don't give you enough time. Where is this now going in spite of what the media is saying?
Yeah, well, I think there are four things to watch. First, I want to go back to what we've been talking about. I think there is going to be an effort to re-examine the Mueller report to see if it is an accurate representation of the body of facts that are now out there. And if not, why would Robert Mueller get things wrong in the report, like he got wrong in the legal analysis according to the Attorney General, and like he got wrong in his news conference? Was the same sort of effort that was going on before Mueller, meaning trying to frame the president, try to create the impression of a crime that for which there was no evidence to support, was that still going on as a dynamic inside the Mueller team based on who he picked to join his team? That's one of the things they're going to be looked at. Two, there is a criminal investigation now underway in Connecticut under John Durham's guidance, and if there were any criminal acts occurred.
But by the way, he wanted to interview Christopher Steele, and the president's going to Europe to England, as we talked about. Apparently they want Julian Assange over here, and it's going to be interesting to see if the Pentagon Papers case holds under his circumstances, or whether they're going to be able to prove he was part of a group that actually took the information. But if it's not, then even the New York Times is scared to death about, quote, what happens to journalism. But what about Chris Steele? Why don't we get him over here?
That's a wonderful question. I think the first question that prosecutors are going to try to act is, based on what we now know about the flaws in the Steele document, did the FBI and the Justice Department violate the law? Did they engage in a conspiracy to mislead the American public during and after an election? And the FISA court, more specifically, to get these warrants. I think it starts there. Will it end with Christopher Steele? That's a great question. We'll have to see how that plays out. But the reason we now have a grand jury and we have a major hard-hitting prosecutor, somebody believed there might be criminality here, and they're now looking
at it. Do you believe these top deep state actors are going to jail or being indicted?
Yes, I think so. And the IG will also get into administrative stuff. So there's a lot of different areas where accountability can be meted out in the near future.
All right. Thanks, John Solomon, investigator.